I mean, it's also really important to
We should email. User phone set URL, like kind of custom stuff like that. You might be better off. They do.
During which I've learned quite a bit about how people interact with information on the web, how they interact with written words, and how they interact with the information that we try and give to them in this digital space. But what really qualifies me to give this talk about, user experience and about websites and about copy is probably the very troubling amount of time that I spend on the internet every single day. I think a lot of you can empathize and are on the same page as me, but I work on the web for work, and my hobbies are very digital, and I always have my phone on me, and so every single day I'm going through all of these different checkouts, like carts or forms, and I'm going through different websites, interfaces, and flows, and I'm just exposed to so much information and so much of this design that we use for the internet that you end up seeing a lot of stuff along the way. You end up experiencing a lot of errors and mistakes and thinking that's not quite right. And so in this talk, I've tried to compile all of that information and to share it with you and to use my knowledge as a copywriter to add some useful tips that will help you fix those flows that might be broken. But before we dig into all of that today, I wanted to share a little experience that I had recently that kind of reminded me of why language and UX design are so intertwined, and it reminded me of why I got interested in this use of language in design in the first place. All of us have used an elevator before, I'm assuming. It's a pretty straightforward experience. You know you're in room 601, it's on the 6th floor, get into the elevator, press the 6, and then quickly close the closed doors button so no one else gets in, right? Super straightforward, you know how it works. And so, that's like a pretty straightforward, universal experience. But what about the button to get down to the ground floor? So in the last week, I've been in Boston, and I've been in Montreal where I live, and I've been in New York City, and I've been in a lot of elevators. That's just like the nature of a dense city. And I tried to notice what the different symbols and letters were used for the ground floor. And I think I noticed maybe 5 or 6 different ways that we identify the ground floor. Lobby, ground floor, and so I kind of documented the street level, one with a star, 0 with a star, G, and RC, which is a French abbreviation for ground floor. And sure, sometimes when we think about these things, we just wish there was a universal system so that anywhere you travel to, you wouldn't be confused about how to get out of the building. But I'll make the argument that more often than not, there's more than one right answer to a design problem. And it also depends on your audience and your context, the language, the level of education, all these things factor into the choices that we make. And it's the same for web design. If we're thinking about, who is our target audience and who's going to be seeing these things, then all the little pieces of text that we have on our website, which I call microcopy, all of those factor into creating a more cohesive and appropriate design. And so all of those little bits of text that, together form the microcopy on our website, for big projects, sure, we would probably have one person dedicated to just refining these things, just to making them perfect. But that's not really the nature, and that's not the reality for everyone. Most of us wear multiple hats. In our companies, we could be, the UX designer and the copywriter. We could be the marketing specialist and be a one-person team. We're business owners and webmasters and web developers and brand strategists, both for ourselves and for our clients or the companies we work for. So the idea of editing all of these little strings of text might seem really daunting and might seem overwhelming, but it's one of those projects that you can really start with one page at a time. So in my presentation, I'm hoping that you'll come back with, or you'll leave with, some tips and some really high-level strategies as well that can allow you to both fix small things and big things up to redoing your whole website. But I'm not recommending doing that. But hopefully this helps. So I kind of break it into 3 large categories of tips. Think big to perfect the small, design with empathy, and keep it simple. So thinking big, when we talk about microcopy, the word micro is in there. It's small. They're small bits of text. Usually they're like 1 word to maybe 8 words max. But when you think about any sort of content, it's really part of a bigger picture. A few years ago, I gave a talk at WordCamp Kansas City about content audits, so that's like very content focused. But the biggest takeaway was that content never exists in a silo. It cuts across every part of your business, you know. So that taking that into consideration, content comes from like a high-level strategy as well. If you think about the purpose of a content writer in a company, and they're writing to convey information, but they're also in charge of sort of the brand messaging, the brand communication. So they're sort of the frontline people representing the brand and the tone of voice. But the content writers also need the product teams. They need the people who are working on the projects. They need the people who are interacting with the customers. The whole organization kind of has to work together to make sure that what the content writers are creating is accurate, it's on brand, and it really is serving the purpose of the stakeholders and the people that we're trying to help. And so with that in mind, you know, the overall content strategy, it has to be a company-wide thing. And so if you buy into that, to the sort of top level, high level direction of the company, everything you do can support those objectives. Everything you do can sort of help move the company along, or your website, your project, your organization, your own personal website, it can really align. And so you have to keep in mind the big picture and also while working on the small things. So, I mean, when you're thinking about a brand strategy, it sounds like something that can only apply to a large organization, but even your own personal brand, you can ask yourselves these questions. What is your company's mission? What is your mission? How do you want people to feel about your brand? If you could picture your brand, you know, if it's not your personal brand, if it's more of an entity, but if you could picture it as a person, how would they act and sound? Would they be friendly? Would they be serious, professional? All of these things you can sort of sit down and think about and try and picture what that person would sound like. The fun thing about copy is that you can use it to sound human, to humanize a product that otherwise would just be like robotic. You can turn it into a conversation. You can use copy to make something sound more friendly, more human, and the effect that has is that when people think that your product sounds human, they're more willing to trust it. It seems like something that's relatable. So, you know, in that idea, can you develop a brand persona that acts as your North Star? Is this something that you can always refer back to? You think, if I'm writing it this way, is this really something that my brand persona would say? And that practically is like getting your team or sitting down yourself and developing a tone of voice that best fits that style. And a style guide that you can use for yourself as a guiding principle. Or if you start hiring people and you want to onboard them, you have that information ready to go. I know that when we build websites, we're often using themes, we're often using plugins that have templates, and a working site is better than a not working site. I'll grant you that. So getting a website working and quickly is super awesome. And you know, in the WordPress community, we're super blessed to have lots of different developers that are making their stuff accessible, open source, so we can not have to reinvent the wheel every time. We can get things working with a lot of template content. But the problem is that, you know, it ends up being super generic. And while it works, it might not be working as well as it could be. And so for every new copywriting project that I take on, I try and start with a few simple questions about the audience, about who I'm targeting, what the purpose of the content is, and what the purpose of my project is. So, you know, thinking after someone interacts with my page or this flow, are they going to feel knowledgeable? Are they going to feel empowered? Are they going to feel reassured? Am I staying true to the brand guidelines that I just, you know, came up with, or that we've established as an organization? And so just as a quick example to kind of get you in the mood of like what that might mean practically, I looked at 3 different websites and just how they labeled their blog section and how it differed from one to the next. So Offscreen is a super cool tech quarterly that SiteGround sponsors actually, but it's friendly, it's casual, it's modern, it's kind of like a quarterly design Wired magazine style. And so they stuck with blog because they have articles in their magazine and they have their newsletter, but their online blog really is just shorter posts that come out more frequently, that sort of add to the value and the content of this brand. But then there's this consulting company that specializes in outsourced document creation. So their tone is much more professional, serious. They're trying to get you to trust them as a provider. And they want to put the emphasis on the fact that they're professional writers, it's a writing service. So they've chosen to call their blog section articles. And it's not a portfolio, it really does act like a blog with posts and tags and categories, but it's a deliberate choice that they've made, not to call it a blog, but to use a word that we more associate with like professional settings like law, academia, and journalism. And then the third example is MIT. I was just in Boston, so I felt inspired, but it's serious in a different way. They come across still as friendly and human because the school really is about the people that are there. However, they don't really maintain a traditional blog with bloggers or guest posts. It really is news items about the research and about the people that are doing cool things at MIT. And so it's the school's community that's being displayed. So for that, they've chosen a more accurate word, which is news. Get news about what's happening on campus. So what I'm trying to show with these three examples is like something that we kind of all take for granted, like you set up a blog or you set up a website with a blog, you're just going to leave the blog as it is. But there's room to really make these tiny changes, like news, articles, blog. And what that has as an effect is that it helps to support the brand and what the brand kind of stands for, but also it sets the expectation of what you're going to see on that page. So if I click on news, then I'm going to see news articles. So speaking of like choosing different words, I suggest being consistent by mapping out all the things that people do on your site and people that are using your site and find names for them. So on your website, are the users, numbers, subscribers, visitors? Maybe they have a different name as they go through the flow. Do you book or make a reservation or RSVP? It's really important to make those decisions early on so that as you're designing your flows and as you're writing your microcopy, you don't just switch it up on your users like halfway through. Like, yeah, you're going to buy a ticket, but I'm going to send you a confirmation email that talks about your RSVP. But someone's like, did I just like save a ticket or did I buy the ticket? If you're sending it to your basket, then you talk about like you have an empty cart and the cart was the same thing. So just like being super consistent. Of course, you don't have to be like, there aren't strict rules. I think there's room for common sense, but generally just making sure that you're not surprising your users in a negative way. Any UX designers in the room will totally get like the idea of a flow. And it's the same when you're thinking about copywriting. Like, what are the messages people saw right before this? And what are the messages they're going to see right after this? And so a lot of websites kind of act as a choose your own adventure. Really great books, Choose Your Own Adventure, super love them. But in like a website, sometimes that can be overwhelming. You want to give your readers or your visitors enough flexibility and room to go about the site, but let's say that you have like a shopping website or you want people to subscribe. You as a creator, you know that you want people to be taking certain actions and to be going through your website in a certain way. And so with your copy, you can guide them to make smart decisions, confident decisions, and to get them also to do the certain actions that you have designed your sites to do. Simple flows that are super common, like sign up, payments, subscription flows, forms and prompts like product and feature tours. All of these are pretty common across multiple sites. But you don't want to forget things that are outside of your site, like the email that your flows will send. If it prompts like a confirmation email, it kind of has to match the flow that they've gone through. And so, to make sure that you're doing this all right, I like to encourage people to really design with like an empathetic mindset. If you can sit down and like map all the steps that your users are going through, you can already start to think about all like the questions that they might have and the problems they might encounter. And not just problems, but you could also spot opportunities to help people do things better and faster and to get them to take the actions that you really want. Like maybe it's to go to the checkout or to add something to their cart or things that actually turn into money for you as a company or as a business later on. There's a book I really enjoy called Nicely Said. It's written by Nicole Fenton and Kate Kiefer-Lee, and I'll link to it in my slides, which I'll tweet out after. But they have a really nice chapter about sort of putting yourself in the shoes of your visitors or your readers. And they suggest just a couple of quick questions that you can ask yourself as you're preparing a flow or a screen, which is like thinking about what your reader is trying to do, thinking about their feelings. How did they get there? Does this make sense? What's happening next? what kind of choices are offered to them in this screen? What is happening in this frame? And if I go through these pretty quickly, like you'll get the slides after so you can see them. How does it relate to the frames before? Is it complete? What's missing from this total picture? Again, sort of big picture thinking. And does everything sound like it came from the same place? So is it consistent? Because even, if you're like a pro, website creation is like super like methodical and you can do it really quickly, but the way that people interact with the site, specifically a news site, is actually very emotional. People have a lot of feelings about it. If they're signing up for something, they have a fear of irreversible change. Like if you're picking a domain name, like Tumblr, for example. I know we're all WordPress people, so we probably don't use Tumblr, but when you sign up, you're choosing your username, and that also is choosing your domain, like your subdomain for Tumblr. So it's like a pretty big fear. It's like, what am I going to call myself? Like, can I change it? And so they add a little bit of text that says, no worries, you can always change this later. And so that really helps people to go through the checkout flow or the sign-up flow easily without fear. There's a fear of data loss. Like, I always appreciate a pop-up message that says, you can save this, or save before moving on, or after a confirmation page it says like print this or save this for later. I don't know if you guys use two-factor authentication for things like backup codes. You have like one chance to save them, and then if you navigate away from that page, it's gone. So these are things that you really want to know before you are embarking on a flow, because data loss is like a bummer. The other thing is personal data security. Why do you need my birthday? What are you going to use this for? This is even more important now that we have regulations like GDPR in Europe. As like website owners, we need to be super transparent about why we're asking for information, what we plan on doing for it, and like sure, it's a regulation thing, but as a user, I'd really like to know like what people are going to do with that information. And it's the same thing about like fear of getting spammed. Like if I give you my email, like my real email, then I'm going to get a bunch of like unwanted email. I'm going to have to like deal with the unsubscribes, which I'm terrible at, so it's just going to pile up, and I'm going to have 2,000 unread emails. So these are all things that you can think about. So copy shouldn't be a crutch for poor design, but you can really use it to help users get started. Explain a new feature, suggest what to do next, how to take an action, and also help them in a moment of failure. Because we're all humans, and sometimes we either design poor flows by accident, or we get lost in a website and like we encounter moments of failure. And so just quickly, when you're like looking at screens, you want to check for typos, you want to edit for consistency, but you also want to review the order. Like, are my questions in an order that makes sense, or am I asking people to jump from like one idea to the next and then back to the first idea? If there are lots of questions, group them in sections and use headers so people can sort of follow along really clearly. And timing, am I showing them a message that isn't really related to what they're seeing at the moment? Can I move that to another step? Does that make more sense? And so, thinking about the balance of information that we're giving them, you want to focus on one specific task at a time. You want to hide distracting messages and links. You want to make sure that the timing, like I said, is like just right, and you don't want to alarm them with messages that aren't like presented at the right time. So, you want to find a balance between overwhelming them, but also you don't want to be patronizing or insult their intelligence. You want to push them in the right direction, but you don't want to overload the flow, right? So, easy, right? Just finding the right balance. And you can't really talk about empathy without talking about accessibility. And I'm by no means an expert in accessible design, but I highly recommend you go to other talks or view talks that are on WordPress.tv about accessibility, because there's so many things that you can do. And they're not even that, like there's some things that you can do really quickly to improve how a website is designed for accessibility. So if you are designing forms, use label elements that screen readers can actually pick up. And sometimes that's just a couple of bits of code that can help screen readers to read out loud and identify the microcopy. Don't hide the support text, that like helper text, behind pop-ups that screen readers can't see, because you're going to want to like support people along the way in the flow, but screen readers aren't going to be able to see all that help text that you've written and designed just for this. And all microcopy should appear as live text and not as static images, because unless you have like an alt text, that's invisible. And test how your microcopy sounds out loud, because if you take away visual cues, that's all people have. And so is your microcopy working? Is it precise? Does it really express what you want it to? And so I would say also keep it simple. So it's, you want to make sure that you're not using overly ambiguous words or jargon. Idioms, for example, don't really translate well if English is someone's second or third language. So you want to use clear, active, and precise language. You want to make sure that you're focusing on one idea at a time. Because you're writing for humans, and you want it to be natural and conversational. And if in doubt, A/B test. Do a couple of different versions of the flow and see which ones seem to work best. So, I know that I'm overloading you with a ton of information that's actually more high level than you probably expected. But my goal and I hope is that you'll take this and really use it to inform all of your different projects. And some of the most common places where you can have the biggest impact by editing your microcopy is the different types of forms, whether they're sign-up forms or just subscription forms, checkouts, like e-commerce checkouts, and error messages. So I'll go through a couple of examples of how you can quickly make your forms better. So this one is actually, I just pulled this from the Jetpack theme or template for forms that you can put on your website. And because it's a short form, it's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It has labels. It mentions which forms or which fields are required. So this doesn't really have any problems. But if you're thinking about more complex forms, and a lot of the interactions that we do have on websites, boiled down, they're just a form. They're just a series of questions, and they're just things that people have to answer or interact with. So for anything longer, I would start by adding an intro message that says what people can expect from this form, how long it's going to take, whether they need to get any extra paperwork ready. I think the biggest drop-off for me if I'm checking out and I'm not on my own computer, I have to go get my credit card. Oh, I have to go to my purse and I have to take it out. So letting people know ahead of time what to expect will also allow you to, I think, have a bigger success rate. So if we're talking about just the text, it says name at the top, but you could also just add your name, or even more friendly, you could say, what's your name? If you need people to be writing their middle name and their last name, when ordering something like airline tickets, for example, it's really specific. You need to put your name in just as it appears on your driver's license or your passport. So that extra information that people might be wondering, you can clear that up in your form. And you can use things like placeholder text. So give them examples of what you're looking for. If the question is ambiguous, placeholder text will give an example both of the content and of the formatting for things like the zip codes or postal codes in Canada. Do I put a space? Do I not? And you can put explanations like, why do I need this information? Things like we talked about it before. And helper text, just to give people more information about how to properly fill out this form and to really help them not get stuck on any questions. So for forms, you always want to use a label, what is this field for? Placeholder text, the helper text like I talked about. Flagging errors, for example. If there are required fields and someone doesn't fill out the form correctly, don't just say, error, please fix your form. Okay, where is the error? You have the red pop-up that will say this field wasn't appropriately filled out, but what did I do wrong? So these are places where you can really customize how people are communicated with and how they can fix what they've done. Even better if you can add, for really long forms, anchors that allow you to click oh, you filled this question out wrong, click here to get there and fix it. These are ways that I can just make it faster. And you can also make clear buttons. So submit is a pretty common one, but if that's not exactly the action people are taking, if it's a save or a send or a join or a book, you want to make sure that those buttons actually reflect what it is that they're doing. And same thing for follow-up messages. If they're getting a confirmation email, it doesn't at all match what they've just done, then that's a really easy place that you can fix that. And also in your follow-up messages, you can push them to do more actions. If you want them to join a community or things like that, your follow-up message is the perfect place to encourage them and to reassure them and to confirm the action that they've done and to push them and sort of amplify that happy moment that they're having. The checkout. So checkout, there's so much documentation on how to create successful checkouts. I'm not a designer, so I'm not going to even try and teach you how to do that. But when it comes to copywriting, there are a couple of different things that you want to keep in mind. And it is mostly about feelings, because the first thing you're doing with an e-commerce store is you're fighting the fear of loss. People don't want to give you their money unless you convince them. So you're always trying to work against that. And so you want to alleviate the user's concern. They're going to be going in and being like, do I really want this? What's the return policy? Am I spending too much money? So you really want to be reassuring your shoppers. So through like a process, you could say you're almost done, or you can add like little encouraging text that will help them to, like, as they're asking themselves questions that will move them away from the shopping cart, just keep them going along and make sure they don't get stalled on any of the steps. For example, if they're wondering what the return policy is, rather than have them click away from the checkout screen, which is the easiest way to lose them, you can have like a link to it where it opens up in a different window, or you can even have just like a quick recap of your return policy. So these are things that can help them answer those questions quickly so they're staying in your flow. And you want to motivate action. So you want to be friendly and encouraging. You want to use active language and action-oriented verbs and sentences. So you want to make sure that the nudges that you're using are positive. And these are things that you can check. And you can also A/B test these to make sure that you're hitting the right tone. And checkout's also a great time to use empty states as a trigger. So if someone has an empty cart, don't just say like empty cart. You can say, do you want to browse our latest arrivals, or do you want to browse like our sales section, or do you want to save your cart for later, sign in to or create an account to save your favorites. You can follow pricing. Depending on how your cart is built, you can create a lot of prompts in your empty stage that will get people to interact with your website sooner and better, and that also, will probably turn into return sales as well. And so these are different things you can do in a checkout. Error messages are one of my favorites because there are so many bad error messages on websites. Like this is just like a silly example, but like, what am I supposed to do with that? Oops, what did I do? Okay. And so again, it's a super emotional experience, and when you're told that you've made a mistake, nobody likes to hear that, and nobody likes to experience a broken flow as well. So I encourage design teams, if they're a copywriter, just for copywriters to be sent all the different error possibilities. And for some websites, that's a lot, but I would look at the most common flows and target those ones first. But like, what are the error messages that people are seeing most commonly? What are the mistakes that they're making? And if it's a design problem, we'll try and fix the design problem, but in the meantime, we can also fix the copy. It has to match the tone. So there are more serious error messages. For example, if someone's credit card's being declined, like that's super like unnerving. You're like, has my identity been stolen? Like, what's going on? I need to call my bank. Sometimes it's also just like you typed in a number wrong. So making sure that you match the tone. And so if it's like a credit card information that you're saying like, oh, maybe you want to check this again, but not trying to be too playful because that might just like strike the wrong chord. But you can also diffuse a moment of frustration by doing something kind of whimsical and funny. So it's like network problem. Maybe too many people are watching cat videos. And you're also matching, you're sort of empathetic, and you're matching the feeling, which is like sad. Okay, there's not much I can do, but at least, I'm not super mad at Google for not like letting me watch more cat videos. And so making sure that you're not just saying like, your form contains errors, please rectify and resubmit. But actually saying like, seems like your password was too short. Use something that's 8 characters or more. Making it conversational, making it like if you were trying to teach someone something and they made a mistake, just telling them what it is that they did wrong and helping them to fix it. And if it is your fault, you definitely want to be nice about it, because if it's like a problem with the flow, then you don't want to be making people more angry. So I said a lot of information, and a lot of it's high level, so I wanted to leave you with a couple of resources that I really appreciate. The book that I mentioned earlier is Nicely Said. And for any copywriter, it's a really good read, so I recommend it. And I'll be tweeting the slides out as well, so you can read them. UX Planning is a really nice blog. I'm not a UX designer, but I do have a big interest in it, so I find their articles are really easy to read and easy to implement. Maybe more easy to implement than my talk, so I definitely recommend that you go and check that out. And then for accessible microcopy, again, I'm not an accessibility professional, so I encourage people to go and research more about that. And so InVision app, if you use it, it's a super cool tool. But their blog has a lot of information about better flows, better UX design, and some of it relates specifically to microcopy and accessibility. I'm happy to take any questions if you have.
So you talked about kind of going back and reevaluating how your initial copy was. What kind of process or tools that can happen Google Analytics? What other kind of strategies do you have to maybe not just rely on your own section?
Yeah.
Think about how you're going.
Yeah, that's a
Can
good
you repeat the question?
So, yes, of course. So the question was, when you're evaluating or reevaluating your website, what are some of the tactics that you use and what are some of the methodologies that you use? For example, Google Analytics. And I do look at Google Analytics because if you're looking at doing, evaluating a whole website, that's a big project. So I always focus on the flows that are getting the most traffic. Where are people going first? And how are people interacting with my site? And where are people dropping off? Because that's a huge hint at where there's a problem. You know, if you have a huge drop off at a certain page, when there's actually clear actions that you want people to be taking on the site after that, it's not just like a designed to be a dead end, then it's a problem. And so starting with that, and a lot of it is spreadsheets. You know, if you're looking through a website, I kind of have all the URLs and I look at Google Analytics and I work with a data scientist to provide that information for me. And we look at it together and I start looking at the different flows and seeing which ones are most high traffic. And then I go screen by screen and I just sort of copy and wireframe and look at those. And then it is a lot of my own assumptions or it is a lot of my own analysis, but often I'll get a second opinion, get people to come in and to test your website as well. And so what I like to do is have someone that's totally unfamiliar with the product, sit down, use the website, and have them say out loud what they're doing. And I really pay attention to the words that they use as they're using the checkout because, or you know, any flow. Because if I think something sounds good written this way, but then clearly everyone using it used a completely different word to identify it, then I'm wrong. You know, I'm the one who has this idea of what something should sound like, but my users are actually all using this one word, this one term. And so I should be listening to them. I should be listening to my target audience and paying attention to the language that they use to describe something. And so a lot of it is, I would say, yeah, just mapping it out in spreadsheets and seeing what the text is, and the fact that you can see multiple screens at the same time is already going to give you a really good idea of what might not be working and seeing it side by side. And whether you choose to do that in, you know, on paper, whether you choose to do that by using Excel, all of those are good methods as long as you can really see your screens side by side and be able to make those connections.
Yeah, you talked about building a brand persona. That's I know a lot about user personas. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So brand personas, a lot of people start companies and they know who they are. Not all companies are like that. Sometimes it takes a couple of years, and sometimes it takes also getting to know who you're attracting, who your customers are, or you know, you may think that you're attracting a certain person, but then you look at your analytics, or you meet people and you're like, oh, this is a totally different audience than I thought. And so maybe I have to readjust my brand persona. But one of the exercises that I like to do to develop a brand persona is doing a who we are, who we're not list. And so, I mean, if you're in marketing, you might know like of the SWOT analysis where you're thinking about your competitors, you're thinking about your opportunities, how you differentiate yourself in the marketplace. And sometimes it's really helpful to do a who are we and who are we not. So if we're looking at, you know, if you're not the number one, that's fine. Maybe you're not the number one in your market, but what is it that you offer that's different? And, you know, if you know that you are friendly but not like silly, you know, those are just helpful terms that you can determine to make sure that you're always sort of aiming for the middle or aiming for something that's unique to you. Another thing you can do to develop your brand persona is start with the user personas, the people who are coming to your site. And you may not be able to speak to all of them with your brand persona, but that's maybe a conversation that you want to have with your team and think strategically, like maybe we're going after too many people, and maybe it's hard for us to find our persona because we are trying to be too broad. And so those are decisions that kind of come as you're working on your company at a high level, but that trickle down into even your microcopy. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
I also wondered, do you know Jerry McGovern's work?
I don't.
He's the guy, when you were just talking about the difference between how you talk about things, he developed this thing years ago, he called it customer care word. And if you just Google customer care word, it's really interesting to see.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't think I repeated your question for the camera, but it was about
A/B testing a few times, sort of a follow on your earlier question asked. Do you have any specific tools that you use, sort of as go-tos for A/B testing in a WordPress environment that you think are very apt?
No, I'm the wrong person to ask because I'm in a very comfortable, lucky situation where I can delegate those tasks. But so no, I don't have a great answer for you because I work with a team. So I get to just be like, hey, let's A/B test this, and someone else does it. No, but if anyone else has an answer for this young man, please go see him.
Any other questions? Oh, that was a question about A/B testing, and the answer was optimize. Optimizely, and
It's either VBO or VRO.
either VBO or VRO. Does anyone know off the top of their heads? Crowdsourcing. No? All right. Well, Google will help us. Any other questions? Let's get a round of applause for Andrea.